my gut instinct was to tell her what to do. And so we were just on a collision course of conflict. And what I thought was straightforward and reasonable, she would just dig her heels in and resist.
Ever feel like you suck at this job? Motherhood, I mean. Have too much anxiety and not enough patience? Too much yelling, not enough play? There's no manual, no village, no guarantees. The stakes are high. We want so badly to get it right. But this is survival mode. We're just trying to make it to bedtime. So if you're full of mom guilt, your temper scares you, you feel like you're screwing everything up, and you're afraid to admit any of those things out loud, this podcast is for you. This is Failing Motherhood. I'm Danielle Bettman, and each week we'll chat with a mom ready to be real, sharing her insecurities, her fears, her failures, and her wins. We do not have it all figured out. That's not the goal. The goal is to remind you, you are the mom your kids need. They need what you have, you are good enough, and you're not alone. I hope you pop in earbuds, somehow sneak away, and get ready to hear some hope from the trenches. You belong here, friend. We're so glad you're here. Hey, it's Danielle. I cannot wait for you to hear this episode. If you have a strong-willed child, this one is a must listen. If you haven't listened to Survive Your Strong-Willed Child, the solo episode I have a few months back, definitely go back and jump into that one and then come back, because knowing what I shared in that episode, being able to relate and being able to better understand will help you then be able to connect and relate to Allison as she shares her personal story of raising her strong-willed daughter. So she has two daughters that are 21 and 19. And in this episode, she dives into her own experience realizing that she's raising a strong-willed daughter, all of the things that she struggled with, that she tried that didn't work, where she was coming from, and then the steps that she took that changed everything for her relationship with her daughter, and now allows her to be able to be on the other side, coaching families with similar kids. So she has studied, worked, and practiced for 15 years with nonviolent communication. She's also dove into a lot of work with Brene Brown's work, Dr. Shefali, Dan Siegel, lots of meditation. She's a certified mediator and does a lot of conflict resolution work. So you can see where she's gaining a lot of wisdom in the parenting world and being able to share so much of what she's learned that you can benefit from. And she shares 3 things that she wished she knew sooner about raising her strong-willed child. She talks a lot about how to feel safe amidst a Category 5 hurricane meltdown and how to embrace your emotions. And it's a huge story of hope, because now her strong-willed daughter is 21 and thriving, and she just wants to share that it doesn't have to be so hard and you're not alone. So dive into this episode and let me know what resonates with you, what you needed to hear, and I hope that you come away with so much hope and knowing that there's nothing inherently wrong with the way that you are struggling with this. If it's hard, there is resources, there is hope. There are people like Allison and like me that are there to come alongside you and just help you find ways to deactivate your triggers and to be able to better help understand where your child is coming from and the ways that they tick that are different than maybe your other children or other kids that you've worked with. So I know that for a parenting coach, you need to have a lot of trust in the person that you are sharing your struggles with. And so you need to be able to find one that really, really resonates with you. So whether that is my coaching, whether that's Allison's, or whether that's any other guest that I bring on, I hope that you pursue the resources that they offer. And I'll keep bringing around people that I really connect with and feel like they could have a lot of value to offer so that you can pursue whatever that looks like. But if you are vibing with me and with some of the compassion that I offer and some of the tools that I can share, I'm now positive discipline certified as a parent educator. And so I have another new toolkit of things that I can share with you one-on-one. And if you're curious or if you're ready to be able to look into getting more sanity and more solutions for your child that you're struggling with and being able to get on the same page with your spouse, being able to have a lot more patience, then go ahead and dive into the resources in the show notes as well. My first step to working with me is a Sanity and Solutions 30-minute call, and we'll be able to share a lot more about what's going on with your family and see how I can help. So don't hesitate to take that next step when you feel moved and ready to do so, because your kids are very, very lucky to have you seeking out these resources like listening to this episode. So you are getting your continuing education credits as a parent by seeking out these resources, and I applaud you for taking the time and taking this commitment because it just really shows how much your kids matter to you. So kudos to you. Welcome to Failing Motherhood. My name is Danielle Bettman, and on today's episode, I'm joined by Allison Livingston. Welcome, Allison.
Great to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much for being able to take the time. I'm so excited for you to be able to share your story because we connected on such a deep level already and resonate in so many ways. So tell us more about who you are and what you do.
So I am first and foremost a mom. I am also someone who now coaches because my journey was so challenging, and I have just a passion for supporting other moms now and dads, and because it's such a clear message that it doesn't have to be as hard as it was for me. I'm also a conflict resolution specialist. I'm a mediator, and I'm a coach of running and soccer. And anyway, just love to give back as well as be in nature.
Love that. And being a conflict mediator is so much of a part of parenting.
So much, yes. It feels like conflict was our life for too many years, and
Yes.
and the amazing thing is, it was part of my mediation skills, but it was also part of just really getting messy with them and learning how to feel. My kids taught me so much.
Yeah. So I can't wait to get to that place of being able to share all the things you've learned. But I want to dive into your story first. So you have 2 kids, right?
Yes, I have 2 daughters that are 2.5 years apart. And my first one is why I learned everything that I know today, because she was so challenging. I had no idea that kids didn't just come out of the box, easygoing and joyful, and they would just fit my plan. I like puzzles, and I really like things to go according to plan. I like to be competent in all things that I'm doing. And when I had my first daughter, and her first impulse was just no, which a lot of children do. But I think these strong-willed kids, that what I had, it was just a whole nother level of intensity that I didn't expect. And I felt like I was a disaster as a mom, and it was really hard for a lot of years.
Yeah. What were some of those first years like when you realized that this was not according to plan and like something about your daughter was different? How did you realize that?
Yeah, it was probably it was out of the gate, but it was really when her sister was born. I think, was jealous of the attention that I was giving to her younger sister. And more than that, just her nature, how she was born, is spirited and passionate and just so strong. And that was a challenge for parenting, because I have learned that these challenger natures come out just fearing being controlled and fearing being told what to do. Well, that's what half of mothering is in the first years, because you just don't know how to do a lot of things. And my gut instinct was to tell her what to do. And so we were just on a collision course of conflict. And what I thought was straightforward and reasonable, she would just dig her heels in and resist. And so we were just at sort of this huge power struggle stage, and it was really hard.
What were the things you tried that didn't work?
As I said, telling that I thought, I'm the parent, I'm the authority. I tell her and she does it. And that did not work whatsoever. That for her, that was like a red thing in front of a bull.
Mm,
And it was just really triggering. It really threatened her sense of being. And I didn't know that because I didn't know there were different natures. And for me, it felt like her responses were disrespectful, rude, sassy. Oh my gosh, her eye roll as she got older was just a thing of art. And that would trigger me. And so she would be triggered, and I didn't know that she was triggered because I didn't know that language yet. And then I would get triggered, and then we would both be doubling down in resistance and just, no, well, I'm going to be right. No, I'm going to be right. And that was what was just so problematic. And it just created all this tension and intensity. And then my husband would jump in and he would try to defend me. And that would make it worse because she felt ganged up on. And then my younger daughter, who hates conflict, would just cower in the corner and feel traumatized. It was just a mess. It wasn't the family I thought I was going to have.
no, that doesn't sound like a plan that you would have created.
No, not at all. And I think that's a lot of some of the challenges that I work with parents on is just our expectations and versus what is. And they often
Hmm.
don't match. And so that's one area that we can really have a lot of agency in and work with. So
For
I really
sure.
have a message of hope that it doesn't have to be as hard as it was for me.
And what was some of the early sibling rivalry like?
The sibling rivalry is again because they had two very different natures. And my first, again, was so strong willed and was a leader. And she was just very powerful, very intense. And my younger daughter was very compliant, very easygoing, really a pleaser. And so she would just get steamrolled over. And I was a second child. I have an older brother. And so that re stimulated a lot of my childhood stuff. And so I would rush in and become mama bear and defend her. And that would again re trigger and just make my older daughter double down because she didn't think it was fair. And justice and fairness is one of their big trigger points. And it just created this awful triangle that, again, I'm just getting wisdom about here now, 15 years later. And if I had known what I know now, I could have really just made so much more peace, real peace in our family.
Yeah. That is such a hard thing to even recognize in the moment when they are those ages, let's say 5 and 3 or, 6 and 4, because you're in it. You're
Yeah.
so in it. You're so deeply entrenched in getting through the day to day, living till bedtime, trying to, conflict mediate for like the 100th time today. So even when moms are, maybe having a lot more resources at their fingertips and being able to resonate with more stories and have more conversations with other moms and things like that, it's still hard to recognize what you're dealing with when you're dealing with it and know how to change and have more awareness or have more consciousness in that moment. So if you were to go back, what could you see were red flags, or what were you experiencing, thinking, feeling in those years that other moms would probably relate to?
Yeah. The biggest one is just that I would get so frustrated and hopeless and overwhelmed. And that those now I see are flags that I need to go take a break. And I'm just so off track that I've got nothing to give my kids and I'll just make it worse. And that was so hard because when I was in it, I was just, I was just reactive and I just, yelled and punished and just,
Hmm.
tried to make it stop. That's all I could think about was make it stop. And now with these clues, there's body clues. So now I know when my jaw gets really tight and when my stomach gets glitchy and when my shoulders get really tight. Again, those are my clues to go get my lifelines because I'm just going to make it worse instead of better when I'm tight and clenched or when I'm feeling just overwhelmed, frustrated, angry, and I don't want to dump and that's all my stuff. I think
Mm.
it's coming from them. They're stimulating me, but it's really my past stuff that's being stirred up. And so it's my work to go get balanced, and instead of just charging ahead. And at that point I thought there was no other way. I didn't know there was another way, and so I would just storm on ahead and just be strong and just take care of it and control. My big thing was I would just control the situation, and that again just made everything worse. So
Right.
my realization is, when it feels urgent, when it feels hard, when it feels awful, that's when we all just need to sit down on the floor and just take a break, or put on music and have a dance party, or go outside. Or there's so many, things, techniques to just break up that tense moment.
Mm-hmm. And I know you're really familiar with Brene Brown's work. And one of
Yes.
the phrases I love from her is realize the story that you're telling yourself. What is the story you're telling yourself? So, what were some of the stories you were telling yourself that would give context or meaning behind the behaviors that you were seeing in your home?
Yeah. So the stories that I was really believing, the stories I was telling myself, those are two phrases I use, because then I am not in it when I can. That gives me that little bit of observation.
Mm-hmm.
And so the stories I was using were, it's her fault. She's wrong. She's too intense, and I would label her. She's obstinate. She's, again, I would just, all these things of, I just thought it was all her. And that was not helpful. It was a story I was telling myself, because she was just being her beautiful nature. And yes, it was triggering my nervous system. And so it was helpful to realize it was a story, and that, you know, she was being her and I was being me, and I could get back to the present moment instead of all this stuff in my head.
Yeah. So, how did you realize that? What was the first step? What changed for you?
So what changed for me is I went to a nonviolent communication class, and that's the first sort of building block of the work that I do now. And it taught me that every feeling we have is pointing to an unmet need or a met need. And usually, if you're needing to grab hold of something, it's because you have an unmet need. You're angry, you're frustrated, you're overwhelmed, you're embarrassed, you're all those things. And so that helped me realize that she wasn't doing it to me, that I was just having a feeling, and that she was just having a feeling, and they were pointing to both of our unmet needs. And that was really transformative.
Tell us more about nonviolent communication.
Yeah, it was started by a brilliant man who's now passed, named Marshall Rosenberg. And there are chapters of it all over the country, all over the world. And it is just such important work to get out of our reactive mode and be able to live from the present moment and from our feelings, needs, body, so that we cannot get so hooked in each other's stuff, so that I'm not triggering you and you're triggering me, and we're both in fight, flight, freeze, and it's just a big mess.
So, what did you take home and start doing differently as a result of that class?
It was a journey, because one of the things that I had developed from my own childhood was how to repress emotions. And that in my family of origin, we just didn't do anger, we didn't do embarrassment, we didn't do sadness, we just stuffed it all. And so then when my kids were born, they just come out of the womb having such fluid access to all of their emotions. And when they're angry, they get angry, and when they're frustrated, they have a tantrum, and they're just so beautiful that way, because it's normal, it's part of our biology. But for me, because I'd repressed it and I'd learned that that was like not safe, I I reacted when they had all these big emotions. And so one of the biggest things that nonviolent communication taught me was, how to reclaim my feelings, so that I wouldn't get so reactive when they'd have a big feeling, because I could actually start feeling again myself. And that's a big, huge part of the work that I do now with parents. And it's I think a big thing in our culture that Brene Brown talks so much about, that feelings are so often just stuffed, and instead we numb. and we don't actually be in their flow. And that breaks this really important, absolutely vital connection between us and our needs, values. And if we're not living from our needs, values energy, then we're just in this really constricted, not happy place. And it's so much easier to conflict.
Mm-hmm. And if a lot of moms, a lot of parents in this generation that are parenting right now have probably similar stories, or they have that disconnect between how they were parented and how they're trying to parent. And we're trying to make sense of this whole idea of emotional intelligence when it was not used with us or it was not taught. And being able to teach something that you're yet to master yourself is a very hard thing, especially with all the other variables that are making it challenging in the moment of these deep years of parenting. So is it possible for parents that are new to these concepts to be able to learn them and teach them?
Yes, 100% yes. And I say it's never too late to make a repair, because when we're learning something new, like Brene Brown says, an FFT, F first time, we're not going to be graceful at it. We're not going to be good at it. And that's a hard place for most of us. It was a really hard place for me. So we're going to make mistakes with it. And for me, I couldn't do it in the moment. Like when I was triggered, I had all my old patterns and they'd come rushing back in. After I learned this information, I knew that I could go back a day later, an hour later, and own that, hey, honey, I didn't mean to yell at you. I'm really trying to do this differently now. And I realized that I got triggered and I was feeling really kind of out of control and really unsure of what to do when you and your sister were getting into it. And I'm so sorry that I got really intense and controlling. And I know that's uncomfortable for you.
So it's never too late to have that conversation.
It's never too late to have that conversation. And that's a beautiful thing. It can be 20 years later. It can be, 5 years later. It can be, whenever it is, it's just me modeling, owning my part that I directed at her. And that is what we want our kids to learn, so that they stop directing their upset at their sibling or at me. And that concept is just huge, and it can really change the world. Certainly changed my family.
Yeah, because I think it's too often we come in with this expectation that the point and biggest moment of influence is right after a behavior occurs, and we have to, do the right thing at the right moment, play the right card, and it has to be either, a negative response or a positive response. And then if we blow that, then there's, no hope, no chance of ever, parenting well then after that moment, because it has to happen right then, so that kids learn the lesson or that it makes sense to them. And, how would you debunk that thought?
I would say that when I'm reacting, nothing good's going to come out of my mouth. And I have proven that over and over and over again. And it also adds a whole nother layer that Brene Brown talks so eloquently about, of shame, that when I unload on my kids with anger, I feel terrible. And I have this big shame storm. And so if I can pause and get one of those signals, that either a feeling or a body sensation that I am reacting, that I'm off track, and just pause, then that can so help me not do those same behaviors where I unload my anger at my kids. And I guess the other thing that you said that really sparked my inspiration is that there's no way of doing it right or wrong. It's just showing up. That if we show up and do our best, that's all that's asked of us. And so if we do something, we kind of think of as not skillful, not our best, then we have an infinite number of chances to keep making repairs and keep trying. So it's just this idea that there's this right that we get from social media, or we get from culture, or we get from books, and there is no such thing. Mm-hmm. So it's just relationship. It's just show up to the relationship.
Yes. Parenting is a relationship, and it's a very intimate, complicated one that is very, very triggering and just very challenging. But it is a relationship. And so all of the tenets of what creates a really healthy marriage or a really healthy friendship do translate to being able to cultivate that same safety, that same trust, that same open communication with our kids. And it does take that level of vulnerability on our part and authenticity to showing up and being, our true selves and sharing part of that connection with our kids, even though it feels scary, it feels uncomfortable, it feels like we don't know what we're doing.
Yes, so much. And feeling uncomfortable and vulnerable was so against what I had learned for the past 20 years. And so it was very triggering, and I would avoid it as much as possible. And it just really brought me to my knees. And then come to find out that's actually the way to connection. Was such a mind-blowing concept, so counterintuitive, that I'm actually supposed to be a mess and be human. And that's when I can connect with my child, not when I'm all proficient and competent and doing the right thing. I really had to unlearn so many of my old patterns.
Yeah. So what are some of the other big realizations or things that you wish you knew sooner that you can share?
And I actually talk about this in an upcoming summit about strong-willed children. The three things I wish I had known sooner. And one of them is just that concept that we are each born with a particular nature, and that once we understand the different natures of our children, we can not take what they are doing personally. And so that then we don't react as much, because we know that they're not doing it to us. They're doing it for themselves to meet needs. That's a huge one.
Mm-hmm.
The other is that my daughter was just so not wanting to be told what to do. And there are ways of parenting that avoid that, and that we can be more partners. I'm still the parent. I still am the director of health and safety. So it's not permissive parenting, but that I can know what is going to trigger her more likely. And so just really shining a light on what triggers each of us. And then the last is that they actually need firm boundaries and clear communication. And I was terrible at that. I wanted to be her friend. I wanted her to like me. And so I had a harder time clear communicating and setting firm boundaries. And if I had done that sooner, she would have actually had more trust in me, because I gave her such mixed messages. And I didn't intentionally do that, but it's just the way it came out. And so if I had known she would have thrived that much more with clear communication, I would have worked on that and figured out how to do that sooner.
What is an example of maybe a way that you said things before that could be clearer? And what's an example of a way that you could say it with more trust built up?
Like if she wanted something, like just an example of she wants a cookie before a meal, and I would not want to tell her no, because she would have a huge reaction when I told her no. And so one of the things with the strong-willed child is the whole family kind of walks on eggshells to avoid their tantrums.
Yes.
So I would have, because they're impressive. So one of the things I would, so I'll go on to that. They need their emotional storms. And so what I know now is just to say no clearly, and let her, and expect that she's going to have a huge emotional storm, and just say that that's not a problem. That's not a bad thing. That's actually her releasing emotional energy. But I was trying to avoid that. And so I would say, oh, let me think about it. Or I don't know. Let's see. When I would just hem and haw and beat around the bush, because I didn't want to say yes or no. I felt like I was in a no-win situation. And now what I know is I just need to be absolutely clear, and then she can move on. Otherwise, she's stuck in this limbo position. She doesn't know if she can trust my words, and she doesn't know kind of how to proceed. And so it's very unnerving, I think, for these strong-willed kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I go back to this phrase often of ambiguity is the enemy. Because when there is that ambiguity between a limit of, can I do this now or later or all the time or never, and it's not clear, that is so inherently frustrating for them.
Frustrating, and it's also scary.
Mm-hmm.
Underneath the frustration is they don't know what to trust. And I didn't learn that for so long because, again, my big goal was to just avoid a big, intense tantrum. And
Mm-hmm.
I needed to embrace that and be clear. And we all would have been so much better off because uncertainty is scary. Our system hates uncertainty more than anything.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd rather have clarity that it is a lion or it is a chair. And that sense of not knowing is even worse because when we start telling ourselves stories, well, it
Yeah.
may be even worse than a lion, and we just blow it up and our imagination just runs away with us. So I love the phrase, in the absence of information, we make stuff up. And what we
Yes.
make up is worse than what is.
Yes. And our kids start doing that at very young ages.
Yes. Yes, they really do. And they internalize a lot. They personalize. When I'm angry, they think it's their fault. And
Mm-hmm.
so it takes a lot of reassurance to really help them feel safe so that they can be their true, authentic selves and be able to be vulnerable themselves because they see me being vulnerable. And that was a really hard lesson for me to learn. Vulnerability is uncomfortable. And
It is.
so the whole practice is how to be okay with feeling uncomfortable.
Yeah. So how did you find your own sense of felt safety through an emotional tantrum level 25?
Yeah. It took a time. It took a journey. So I want to have a message of compassion for all the parents in the middle of this right now. Is it's hard. And
Mm-hmm.
just I have a gesture of support where I kind of rub my arm. Some people put their hands on their chests. So one of my things that I do to reassure myself and create my own sense of safety, which is a great question, is build an anchor. And
Mm.
this anchor comes, it can be a color, it can be a place, it can be a gesture of touching, like rub your cheek. And it's just a way to reassure your nervous system, which is in panic mode, that actually you're in your living room and your daughter is just screaming. You are safe. There are no wolves. And it's a really important thing to say, I'm telling myself stories. I'm scaring myself. Breathe. I'm actually in my living room with my daughter who's screaming. And I'm the one that's creating the problem because I'm thinking this is a problem. This shouldn't be happening. And actually it is happening. And she's letting off emotional energy and everything is just as it should be.
Mm-hmm. So much is getting control of those thoughts and then rewiring some of those thoughts to be more helpful so that it is more of a calming sensation than it is a heightening, frightening sensation that we add to it.
Yes. And I was good at this when she was an infant. I used to calm myself and sort of reframe her screaming because she was kind of a colicky baby. And I would say she's getting exercise, that she can't run around yet. So her screaming is just her way of getting her own exercise. And so it was a little bit of that when she got older, once I learned these concepts of, her tantrums are just her way of expressing that something really matters to her. And it's not a
Yes.
problem. It's okay. She has an unmet need and she's really telling me about it clearly.
Yes. Which is exactly what's happening.
Yeah. And it's not, I'm safe. I'm still safe. It doesn't mean I'm a bad parent. It doesn't mean that I'm a failure. It doesn't mean that she's a failure. That anyone's wrong. It just
Mm-hmm.
means she's trying to communicate.
It just is.
It just is.
Yeah. Yeah, but that is an evolution for sure. You can't just listen to that and be like, oh, yep, click, makes sense. Tomorrow I can handle all of the world's tantrums and no problem.
Right. Well, and there's the Brene Brown thing of we care about what people think. So that's one of the big barriers to how it looks. It doesn't look right, right? And when
Mm-hmm.
especially if you're in the store and there's everybody's staring at you, it's just, again, that's when you go back to your anchor, your gesture of support. This is hard. This is hard.
Yep. So how old is your strong-willed daughter now?
My strong-willed daughter is 21. And I have a message of hope because it was so awful for us when she was younger. And now we have a beautiful relationship. And she actually teaches these tools to her friends because she uses them and believes in them. And we wouldn't be here today. Many of the parents that I work with, and actually her cousin, they're estranged because
Mm,
this relationship dynamic can be so hard because they lead with fight of the fight, flight, freeze. And
mm-hmm.
so they're so triggering. But when you understand who they are, you can realize that it doesn't have to be like that. And so I just have a message of hope that you can really turn it around. You are empowered. You can do this.
Yes. And how old was your daughter when you really started using some of these new tools?
It was 15 years ago. So she was about five or
Okay.
six.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of parents have fears, and that fears, the fear drives their behavior. So can you calm some of those fears? Did she fail all her classes? Did she do a
Yeah.
stint in juvie? Like what happened?
All those thoughts we fear. I mean, I've heard this so much that we think they're going to be homeless. We think they're
Yep.
never going to have a mate. They're never going to, yeah, all these different things. And I have, yes, a lot of reassurance that they have everything they need within them to live a beautiful life. In fact, they are some of our world's leaders because they are so strong and passionate about so many things. And she was able to get self awareness. And I still remember the day and where she was standing the day she first owned and recognized that she had a part in our conflict. And that's one of the clear markers for this nature of child, this strong-willed child, because they don't want to take responsibility for anything. It's always somebody else's fault. They fear being vulnerable so much that they just have to deflect it. And
Mm,
so it took a lot of modeling on my part about me owning what my part in the conflict is, and she saw that enough, and then she was able to do it, and now she can. So again, that's
that's
just a message
huge.
of hope. Yeah. And
Yay. That's so
it's possible.
reassuring. Yeah. Well, I'm so
Yes,
glad for you and for her and for her future and her potential. And she's so lucky to have you as a mom that was willing to go through that hard journey and be so vulnerable and learn so many things and take so much ownership, because it made it possible for you guys to have a really strong relationship now on the other side.
for sure. And it really is through being uncomfortable and through opening, vulnerability, even in the face of fear. And that takes so much courage, and it's possible. So
Yeah.
it's amazing because we don't deeply connect unless we're at that open, vulnerable place.
Mm-hmm. So if I
And it's
if I was if I was to give you a pedestal to stand on, what is anything else that is on your heart that you feel like moms need to hear?
just that emotions are our friend. This idea of befriending emotions, and not just the pleasant ones, but all of them.
Mm-hmm.
Befriend embarrassment, befriend shame, befriend anger, that it has a message for us, and it is the way through to connection, even if it's uncomfortable. And that emotions aren't bad. They felt to me messy, inefficient, and purposeless and uncomfortable. Why would I feel fear? That just seems ridiculous. And so I had this phrase, want to feel fear, because wanting to feel fear seemed stupid. So the interim step to practice is wanting to want to feel it. And so
Mm.
that's one tool you can start to play around with. And the other great one is counting your shoulds, because every time we should something, either ourselves, I should be better at exercise, I should be better at not yelling, she shouldn't yell. All those shoulds are separating us and creating, armor between what is, and all these expectations were layering on top of it, and that's not easy. So
No.
yes, it's possible, and yes, you can have connection even with strong-willed children.
I love that. That is the message we need to hear, for sure, because I have one of my own. I know so many other families too. So
yeah, and it's all we want. It's all I
it
wanted.
is at the end of the day. Yes, yeah, because there isn't as much that many more things beyond that we can even control.
Yeah. So start befriending your emotions and know that they have a purpose to communicate about our needs. That's the huge first step.
Mm-hmm. So such a world of its own to
Yeah.
explore.
And actually not the first step. The first step is anchoring to your safety and giving compassion to yourself, because this is a hard journey. All parenting is so hard. So just keep showing up. There's no right way to do it.
Yes. I love that message. So share more about how listeners can connect with you.
So I have a program called From Surviving to Thriving with Your Strong-Willed Child. And I specialize with these strong-willed children because I have such a passion for them. They're the most misunderstood and triggering of the types, because their core fears are just in a direct opposition to traditional parenting. And the website is called 5 Steps to Connect. And the whole idea is connect with your strong-willed child, because that's just so what I wanted to do. And it works for all children, but it's, I think, really tested when you have a strong-willed child.
Yes, they're next level.
And there also is a summit that I'm one of the guest speakers on, and I can put some information about that. And they are focusing on just how to be a parent of a strong-willed child. So it's a great resource, and I hope you'll check it out, because it's, again, just lots of great ideas and actionable steps that you can take today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll put all of those links in the show notes so that listeners, whenever they're listening to this, can go and find that as a resource.
Yeah. And the last thing, which is a more affordable option, is I have a membership of all parents with strong-willed children. And there's so many great resources and webinars, and there's live Q&As, just because it's important for us to stick together and realize we're not alone, and realize we're not failing, and that there are tools and resources out there, that it doesn't have to be so hard. So if you're struggling, please reach out, because it can be so much better.
Yes. I love that you're doing that. We need a community, for sure. So yes. The last question I love to ask every guest that I have on is, how are you the mom that your kids need?
That's a beautiful question. I think I'm the mom my kids need because I was willing to learn, and I was willing to stretch and grow. And I think the other way that I've heard that said is, why are they the kids that I need? Mm-hmm. And I give credit to my older daughter, to both of them, but they have taught me so much, and I wouldn't be the person I am today with as rich a life with my emotions and connection with my values if I didn't have each of them. So it's just about showing up and not trying to do it right.
So true. Yes. Thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom and taking this time and being able to, again, be vulnerable and go first and sharing your story and your experiences that were rocky. We're not exactly the polished picture of motherhood that you were expecting. And I think we can all resonate with that. Did I ask you, have you ever felt like you were failing motherhood?
I felt like I was failing motherhood most days, especially in the beginning, because I just didn't know what I was intuitively doing wasn't working. And I just felt like a brute because I would yell and kind of try to control and dominate. And I felt like I was just uncertain about how to proceed. And so then I was this ambiguous parent that was not what she needed. And I got in the middle of their sibling stuff and just made that worse. So I felt like I was doing it all wrong. And especially because I like to do things well, it just was shame trigger after shame trigger. So Yes.
Yes.
I was really drowning there for a number of years, and it was not hard, not easy. So just give yourselves a big, huge hug,
Yes.
because this is a journey for us.
You are not alone, for sure.
You're not alone. Yes.
Well, thanks again, Allison. I will have all those ways to connect with you in the show notes. And again, I just appreciate what you're putting into the world because it's so needed by so many parents.
Thank you so much for your podcast and being a voice of compassion and awareness for so many parents. We all really need it.
All right. Well, I hope that you could relate to Allison and her story. I hope that you know you're not alone and it doesn't have to be so hard, and that there are so many resources and people like us ready and willing to come alongside you to help you feel like you are figuring this thing out and being able to be messy and vulnerable and show up and do the thing, gives yourself so much self-compassion. So again, jump into the show notes, find ways to connect with Allison and I, take a next step from this episode that better aligns you with the parenting that you want to be carrying out on a day-to-day basis. But you are amazing. You are doing the thing. You are listening to podcasts that really encourage you and pour into you so that you have more to give your kids. You are doing a better job than you give yourself credit for, and I'm just so proud of you and so glad that you are being able to take the time and share it with me. So thanks for coming on this journey with me. I believe in you, and I'm cheering you on.